that's familiar with the occult and the teachings of theosophy, such as Helena Blavatsky and many other minds, this inspired so many different movements. Whether it's like the folkish movement that really took Nazi Germany by storm, and people, if you are acquainted with names like Hitler and Himmler, this is really what inspired a lot of the theology that pushed them for their world domination to basically usurp the Zionist Jewish nation, and because they believed that it was a detriment to this future root race of the Aryans that actually descended from the time of the Atlanteans. So we're going to get into a lot. It's going to be Rudolf Steiner, Helena Blavatsky, like a lot of cool teachings, guys, tonight. And we're going to see where these spiritual races actually descended from when it pertains to humanity. Now, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar. If you've watched some of my videos where we've looked into the Sons of the Laws of One, I think it's called the Sons of the Laws of One, where we kind of get into these primordial beings that descended from the ethers, and these were races of humanity before we took physical form, before like the Luciferian consciousness kind of took hold and we're in our fallen state that now, right? Where we're kind of physically minded, and it's not more about the spiritual. Where once upon a time, there was a race of humanity that was more a part of the ethers than they were a part of the physical reality, where they had access more or less to a wider variety or a wider spectrum energetically or frequency wise to more sound and more light and more spiritual beings than what we see now. A lot of people believe that this was pre-diluvian, meaning it was pre-flood. So before the flood came along, which I feel like the great deluge or the flood was actually the Piscean age, right? Because the age of Pisces is ruled by water, right? And that's where you get the whole concept of Christ walking on water, and you look into the Nag Hammadi, or the reality of the rulers, and the firmament separating the waters above and the waters below, right? And we know that in the tarot, the waters represent emotions, or the astral, the dream state. We're made up of 70% water. The earth is made up of 70% water. So I feel like that's what the deluge that took place all across the earth was actually about. Was this changing of the guard, or this cycle when it comes to humanity, us shifting from and if you think of like the ages of Aries and Taurus, right? And in particular Aries, which would be the time of Marduk, where we went from fire, right, which is that of magic, right, a time of magic, to a time of water, which was a time of emotion and duality. And that's why the age of Pisces is the two fish. One fish represents the above, or the dualistic nature of the higher or greater keys. One fish represents the below, or the nature of the lesser keys, right? Or the lower self, right? Our shadow self, our higher self. Well, now we're going into the Aquarian age, which is the man carrying the pail of water. And when Christ was asked by his disciples how he would know the end of the age had come, he said, when you see the man carrying a pail of water, follow him into his house, right? And he was talking about his astrological house, right, in the zodiac. And that astrological house represents the age of Aquarius. Now, the man carrying the pail of water, it does represent man, right? Man mastering the ethers or the air, and that's why Satan is known as the prince of the power of the air, because it has to do with consciousness, right? It's a mental, conscious paradigm that we're talking about. And whenever we see, the consciousness is also ruled by, driven by the staff in the tarot, and the staff represents kingship or power or dominion over the ethers, meaning we're able to now have control over our consciousness. Humanity now mastering the consciousness, doing things in a more conscious way, expanding consciousness, expanding awareness. And he's carrying that pail of water because he's mastered the water now. We're now leaving the age of Pisces. We've now mastered the emotions. right? We're now able to rule over the astral and to now start living in a more conscious way. And that's, with the age of Aquarius, it's, pertains to technology, the collective. That's why you see things shifting now to more technological with the rises in AI and all of the different technologies that we're seeing now, as well as the societal structure shifting from, the few at the top of the pyramid, to the many now at the bottom. And it's about the people, it's about the collective, and about collectives, collective consciousness, and so forth. So today, as we get into this, we're going to talk about these root races. Some people believe there's 5 root races. Some people believe there's 7. So we're going to look at different ideologies. And like I said, we're going to look at the story of Atlantis as well, the children of Poseidon, as written by Plato. And I'm just telling you, this is these are some of the subject matter that I love the most. So if you guys enjoy tonight's content and you would like to hear more, or you would like to support my channel, please donate and support. That's how I keep all this going. We're about, I think, like $100 away from the monthly goal. So if you want to help me reach that, that's how we pay the bills. That's how we do the streaming services and all the cool stuff. And if you'd like to join us every week, usually on Sundays is when I do it. I didn't do it this last Sunday, but I will be doing it this week. For the uncensored content, you can do that by joining us on Patreon or donating and supporting. And if you have donated, text that number and I'll send you the links to the private playlist. I believe on those playlists, we've got the it's the Mysteries of the God series, as well as the Forbidden Occult series and the Necronomicon series. All of those that were once public, now go to the unlisted. This one will be available for a while. So we're going to start here. Let's go ahead and get started. And let me see if I can pull up the chat too. And just say thank you to all of you guys for joining me. I really do appreciate all of you, honestly. Kimberly F., Melopedia Britannica, thank you so much. All right. Now let's go ahead and make sure to hit that like too if you guys are in the chat. I am only streaming this one on one platform right now, but I will be restreaming this on all of them. And I'm sorry if I'm sweating. These lights are so hot. I just need to, maybe I need new lights or something. It's the lighting. It really does get to me. So let's go ahead and jump into this here. All right. Alright, we're going to start first with the tale of Plato's Atlantis. Well, here, let me show you kind of let me pull up the graphic first before we jump into this here. Alright, hopefully you guys can see this. Let me make sure you guys can see this at home. Okay, looks like you can. Alright, this is humanity. And these are the 5 root races as known, or the 7 root races as known by Helena Blavatsky. Now, all right. Whoops. All right. Sorry, guys. Alright. Now, Blavatsky asserted, hold on, sorry guys, gotta get this where I can see it right. Alright. Now, Blavatsky asserted humanity was in the 5th root race, the Aryan race, which theosophists believe to have emerged from the previous 4th root race, or the Atlantean root race, beginning about 100,000 years ago in Atlantis. Now she shows you the root races right here, and we'll kind of look at them. See if I can get the graphic a little better here. Pull up the other graphic. We'll start with the story of Atlantis, then we'll go through the root races. So let's start with the story of Atlantis first. Sorry guys, I'm a little all over the place. My bad. Plato's Atlantis. The tale of which was of great length, begins as follows. I have before remarked in speaking of the allotments of the gods, that they distributed the whole earth into portions differing in extent, and made themselves temples and sacrifices. And Poseidon, receiving for his lot the island of Atlantis, begot children by a mortal woman, and settled them in a part of the island which I will proceed to describe. And I just want you to remember, Poseidon is the god of water, which we could go back to the story of Enki and Enlil, right? The two brothers of creation, and Enki being the brother that, you know, the god of knowledge and enlightenment, which actually born humanity. We came from Enki's seed in the ancient Sumerian text. Watch my video, Who is the Anunnaki, for those of you guys that have memberships. And Poseidon being the god of the waters. Remember, we talked about the Diluvian, right, and antediluvian time period, right? So this great flood that took place, bringing in the Piscean age, or the age of water, where man was made up of 70% water, the earth being made up of 70% water. We came from a time from the Taurian age and the Aryan age, Aries, Taurus, right, astrologically, into this new age of Pisces, okay? Now, Atlantis means of the Atlantic, or the Atlas, right? Like of the world. So Enki, or Enlil, Enki and Enlil. Enki, his first name being Ea, E-A, right? Ea, was the god of the water, or lord of the water, and then changed his name to lord of the earth, Enki. So when we see Poseidon, he's the triune god. He has the pitchfork there, right? And let me pull up Poseidon here for anybody that's trying to see this. Let me show you Poseidon. This is Poseidon. And he's one of the 12 Olympians, which, remember, this is why in Freemasonry we see the number of 13, right, is very sacred, because it's the 12 around the one, like the 12 disciples around Jesus, the 12 astrological signs around the sun, so on and so forth, right? That's why there's never that 13th floor in an elevator, right? So Poseidon, one of the 12 Olympians in Greek religion and mythology, presiding over the sea, storms, earthquakes, and horses. He was the protector of the seafarers and the garden of many Hellenic cities and colonies. In pre-Olympian Bronze Age Greece, Poseidon was venerated as a chief deity at Pylos and Thebes, which the cult title Earth Shaker, in the midst of isolated Arcadia. Right, so he was the earth shaker. And he is related to Demeter, which is the Olympian goddess of the harvest and agriculture, presiding over crops, grains, food, and fertility. And Persephone, who is also called Kor or Cora, the daughter of Zeus, and Demeter, who became the queen of the underworld after her abduction by her uncle Hades, which, you know, Pluto, basically. And was venerated as a horse and as the god of the waters. And remember, Enki was first the lord of the waters, as Ea in earth, E-A, Ea, E-A-R-T-H. Rearrange that and it's heart, right? Okay? And water represents emotions, okay? Now, Poseidon maintained both associations amongst Greeks. He was regarded as the tamer or father of horses, who, with a strike of his trident, which is like the pitchfork, created springs. The term for horses, springs, are related in the Greek language. His Roman equivalent is Neptune. So Neptune is the god outside. Neptune and Uranus are outside of the rule of Saturn. So if we look at Saturn as the matrix, right, the Saturn moon matrix, the Saturn is the black cube, right, 666, or the Father, Chronos, the Father of time, right? The Lord of time, the Lord. And if we look at 666, it translates into time. It's not just the carnal number of man with the 6 carbon, etc. It's also representative of time, right? So time represents a construct of the matrix. Matrix translates into womb in the Hebrew. So this is the womb of time that we're being birthed in here, right? And this, what we would call people can call it a simulation, if they will, but in essence, it's a holographic projective reality, where what we call as the archons or the governors or the watchers or the messengers, right, or the sons of Satan or the whatever, right, those are the 7 main planets, which represent the 7 colors of the rainbow, which represent the 7 chakras, and all of that, and their light is prismed through our electromagnetic field, or our collective third eye, right, or our collective aura, right, which we call the electromagnetic field, and it's called soul luminescence or star in a jar, which creates the phantom, projection, or illusion. If we look in Genesis, it says that humankind was made in the image of the Elohim, Elohim representing sons of God. Sons of God translates to luminaries. Luminaries meaning planets, princes, watchers, messengers, gods, whatever, right? These planets that we were talking about. Remember those 7 colors of the rainbow is a covenant with God, right? So the Ark of the Covenant, right? That's the agreement we have with the heavens, all right? So all the other luminaries or astrological entities are smaller influences on the whole. But those 7 main planets, that's why they're venerated in the 7 days of the week and so on and so forth. They come through in metals, everything, colors, whatever. These are the deities. And then we have the astrological deities, which make up the 12 around 1, meaning the 12 disciples around the sun or Christ, or the 12 zodiacals around the lunar or the solar sun that we have in the sky, right? And this is where this all gets the solar worship and all of that. So, Poseidon maintained both amongst the Greeks, which he was regarded as a tamer or father of horses. The strike of his trident created springs, a term for horses and springs related in Greek. Now, these colors are then prismed through, this third eye, this collective third eye that we call the electromagnetic field, right? Or the firmament, right? Which also represents an arc, right? Another word for firmament is arc, right? An arch. So arc of the covenant would be the firmament with that covenant of the rainbow, right? That projection. And in Genesis, humankind was made in the image. Image translates to phantom, projection, illusion. So we are a phantom or a projection of something in the higher heavens, right? So look at the stars as looking down in the ethers, projecting their light through this prism, which creates us, which is an illusion. It looks like it's real. It looks like it's physical, but it's really just like a movie of the light and sound that's being projected from above. Now, Homer and Hesiod suggest that Poseidon became the lord of the sea following the overthrow of his father Kronos. Now remember, Kronos is Saturn, Satan. Saturn has the hexagonal North Pole, or the hexagon. So hex, right? When you've been hexed or X'd out, planet X, the X box, right? And in the Masonic black cube, the dimensions of that is 1 plus 5, 1 plus 5, 1 plus 5, 666. That's another way where we come up with the dimensions of Saturn, or the Saturnus cube god, which around Mecca, they walk around a black cube, right? They're just mimicking the orbit around Saturn, and it's a Saturnian soul system. It's a soul system trapped in time, ruled by Saturn, or the All-Father, right? Now, Uranus and Neptune are outside of the rule of that, right? The moon, which in the Kabbalah is the bottom of the Kabbalah, and let me show you this, the Sephiroth. So the Sephiroth in Kabbalah, the bottom being the silver, which is the moon. Let's see if we can pull this up. can see how it translates to the configuration of the human body as well. Okay. Each one in the Sephirah having its organ that correlates with it. The Kether, Chakma, Bina, Diat, Chised, Jeruba, Tiferet, Nisach, Had, Yisad, Malkuth. Right? Let's see if it gives us the image up here, right here. Right? Down at the bottom here, right, is silver, right, which represents the moon. It's the moon acts as like a parabolic dish, right, which reflects pure awareness from the sun, as well as filtering those 7 deities that represent the colors of the rainbow, or those 7 main planets, right? Okay. Now, Homer Hesiod suggests that Poseidon became lord of the sea when overthrowing his father Kronos, which is father Time or Saturn. The world was divided by lot among Kronos' 3 sons, the Trinity. Zeus was given the sky, that's Jupiter, the lord of lightning. Jesus, right, Jesus, right, who bore our stripes, Jupiter being the striped planet, and he has the all-seeing eye, or the red eye of Jupiter. Hades, the underworld, which is Pluto, right? Pluto represents all of, the Lucifer. He actually came above the, what is it called? Not the equinox. Elliptical plane around this time, right? Which is now dipping back under that elliptical. Astrologically during the time of this. That's why there's so much effect on money, the things that are hidden, the occult. That's what Pluto's rules. He's the lord of the underworld. He would be like your Lucifer or Hermes, or something like that. Hades was given the underworld, and Poseidon, which would be Ea, right, or Enki, which is the god of the water and the lord of the earth. Okay. In the Greeks, against the Trojans, the Trojan War, in the Odyssey, during the sea voyage, Troy came back to it. By lot, Mount Olympus beyond all 3. Homer's Iliad, Poseidon supports the Greeks against the Trojans during the Trojan War. In the Odyssey, during the sea voyage, from Troy back home to Ithaca to the Greek, Odysseus provokes Poseidon's fury by blinding his son, the Cyclops, Polyphemus. And I just want to tell you, the Cyclops is because our third eye. He blinded our third eye, meaning we lost our spiritual sight, right? And Polyphemus is the one-eyed giant son of Poseidon and Theusa in Greek mythology. One of the Cyclops is described as Homer's Odyssey. His name means abounding in songs and legends. Why is that? Because Lucifer, the lord of music, the fallen angel, or the light bearer, or light was falling from heaven down, or fallen in consciousness, right? Entrapped in sound or matter, and the legend is the men of renown, the heroes of old, which represents Nephilim, which is also fallen. So we're a fallen sound, and when we're born in sin, sin also translates into sound. Just saying. Or the many-voiced, or very famous, right? Polyphemus first appeared as a savage man because he was a man. Okay, we're the children of Poseidon, right? And we fell from Atlantis, or our Atlantean state, which was a more spiritual, conscious state, right? We were very magical in that time, right? A time of fire as opposed to a time of water, right? Now, resulting in Poseidon punishing him with storms, causing the complete loss of his ship, his spaceship, right? His Merkaba, or his aura, and his companions, right? And the companions are those 72 demons that were pre-flood. They were parts of the human collective subconscious or unconscious that we no longer have access to. And delaying his return by 10 years. 10 years representing 10, which is the number of God. It's the up Jacob's ladder, right, in consciousness. Poseidon is also at the subject of the Homeric hymn and Plato's Timaeus and Critias, and the legendary island of Atlantis was Poseidon's domain. So now that you know about Poseidon, let's go back to Atlantis. And Poseidon, receiving for his lot the island of Atlantis, begot children by a mortal woman. And remember, the fallen, what did they do? They came unto the daughters of men. Right? Are we starting to see a story? Are we starting to see a theme? Did you think that giants were an extraterrestrial race? Did you think that the gods are somebody else? Did you think that they were all talking about another person besides you? Did you think someone else built the pyramids? It was you. On the side toward the sea, and in the center of the whole island, there was a plain, which is said to have been the fairest of all plains and very fertile. Near the plain again, and also the center of the island, at a distance of about 50 stadia, and remember 50, why is it 50? Because Prometheus brought the 50 sparks, right? And what was we just looking at the other day when we were looking at the Anunnaki and the 50 original Anunnaki that traveled with us? Are you starting to see, a common denominator when you read these stories? I hope so, because once you start to recognize these symbols, once you start to recognize these patterns, it sticks out and consciousness becomes more aware for you to understand. Awareness starts to grow. In this mountain, there dwelt one of the earth-born primeval men of that country, whose name was Evanor, and he had a wife named Lucippe. And they had only a daughter, whose name was Cleito. The maiden was growing up to womanhood when her father and mother died. Poseidon fell in love with her and had intercourse with her, and breaking the ground enclosed the hill in which she dwelt all around, making alternate zones of sea and land, larger and smaller, encircling one another. There was 2 of land and 3 of water, which she turned as with a lathe out of the center of the island, equidistant every way, so that no man could get to the island, for ships and voyages were not yet heard of. I want you to understand what's being talked about. You're looking for it as a place on earth, aren't you? You were told that this was a place on earth. You were told that you could find this and that there's some fucking imprint. Let me show you, because this is what people say about it. Let me just show you how full of shit they are and how they don't know what they're talking about. Atlantis in Africa. And I tried to talk about this the other day, and it's not a popular fucking thing to say, okay? Because people don't like to be proven wrong. But when they talk about the original man, and we talked about how they said he was of dark skin, meaning that he was a shadow. It was a lower self that was a slave race. It wasn't a black man. It was our shadow. And then they try to tell you the physical place of Atlantis is here in Africa. Or the ship of Ahura Mazda, right? You guys have probably all heard this before. Possibly. But is that what they're actually talking about? Or is that what an exoteric, external, lower consciousness understanding would have you think? I'm going to go with part B. An exoteric, lower consciousness understanding would have you think. Right? Because the truth is that they're talking about the story of humanity from our dissension from an age that was past in our time of Atlantis, right? Atlas, who carries the world on his shoulders, right? Where we can lift the world up with our consciousness instead of being crushed under the weight of it, right? Before that, right? Poseidon fell in love with her when the waters fell in love with consciousness, right? Enclosed in the hill that she dwelt all around, that hill being, like the mountain or majesty of God, right? Making alternate zones of sea and land, larger and smaller. These are dimensions or level of consciousness. This is a spiral, a downward spiral that they're talking about. The Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio, alternate zones of sea and land. As above, so below. When the water separated the firmaments above and below, right? Alternate zones circling one another. There were 2 of land and 3 of water. Water representing the ethers. Water representing the spirit world, right? The dream world, which he turned with a lathe out of the center of the island. Remember when John, the divine, in the book of Revelation was sent to the island of Patmos, right? The island is you. You're the island, my friend, because the universe is you inverted, right? Now, for ships and voyages were not yet heard of. Voyages meaning travel from astral travel was not yet heard of. Ships meaning Merkabahs or spaceships, right? Our ship was not able to travel outside of consciousness, right? And were not yet heard of. He himself, as he was a god, a little g god, meaning a son of God, or the Elohim, right? Who made in the image mankind, meaning of our own image, we're fallen. Lucifer, that light bearer, fell into sound, the god of music, right? Or sin, sound, right? Sound, matter, physical, people, skin, right? Found no difficulty in making special arrangements for the center island, bringing 2 streams of water under the earth. 2 streams of water under the earth, like what? Like what? Caduceus. 2 streams of water under the earth, the 2 serpents, Enki and Enlil. People are getting initiated tonight, right? People are going to learn some shit tonight. 2 streams of water under the earth, which he calls to ascend as springs. One of warm water and the other of cold. Red pillar, blue pillar, Heliopolis, solar, lunar, left, right, black, white, up, down, duality. Making every variety of food to spring up abundantly in the earth. Because it's manifested, it's projected out of consciousness. He also begot, let me show you, let me see if I can show you the definition of this. I might have to pull up my, the word here to get the good definition. Begot. Typically of man, sometimes of a man and a woman. A child, bring a child. In the process of reproduction, it means to bring forth. They hoped the king might begot an heir by the new queen. Success begets further success. It means to bring forth. He brought forth. He also begot, or brought forth, up 5 pairs of male children. 5 pairs. Like the pentacle, or the pentagram, or Lucifer, or the starfish body, right? A head, 2 arms, 2 legs, right? Or digits, digitaria, your fingers and your toes. Dividing the island of Atlantis into 10 portions. 10, right? 10, Jacob's ladder, the 10 dimensions, right? He gave the firstborn of the eldest pair his mother's dwelling and the surrounding allotment. Why did he give the firstborn his mother's dwelling? Because that was the time of Inanna. That was the time of Isis. That was the time of the divine feminine. That was the first Aeon. He gave the firstborn of the eldest pair his mother's dwelling and the surrounding allotment, which was the largest and best, and made him king over the rest. The divine feminine, the Holy Spirit, Pistis Sophia, who fell from the 13th Aeon by Yardabaoth. The others he made princes. Princes translates to stars, luminaries, planets, princes, right? Heavenly host, angels, sons of God, Elohim. And gave them rule over many men. A large territory, so the stars ruled over men, derived from the divine feminine, which is the Holy Spirit. And he named them all. The eldest who was king, he named, say what? Atlas. Atlas, who held up the earth. And from him the whole island and the whole ocean received the name of Atlantic, which means of the Atlas, of the Atlantic. To his twin brother, Enki and Enlil. To his twin brother, right, Cain and Abel, who was born after him, Cannibal, who was born after him, and obtained as his lot the extremity of the island towards the pillars of Hercules, those pillars we just talked about, red, blue, left, right, black, white, up, down, Democrat, Republican, Heliopolis, right? The Pillars of Hercules, as far as a country which is still called the region of Gades. In that part of the world, he gave the name, which in the Hellenic language is Eumelus. In the language of the country which is named after him, Gadaris. Of the second pair of twins, he called them Amphirs and the other Avamon. To the third pair of twins, he gave the name of Nisus to the elder and Ochethon to the one who followed him. Of the fourth pair, he called the elder Asclepius and the younger Mestor. And of the fifth pair, he gave the elder the name of Asius and to the younger Diapries. And these and their descendants were the inhabitants and rulers of diverse lands in the open sea, and also has been already said, they held sway in the other direction over the country within the pillars as far as Egypt and Tyrrhenia. Now these children, could they represent the five senses? Could they represent the chakras? Could they represent the continents? Could they represent what? Right? Now Atlas had a numerous and honorable family, and his eldest branch always retained the kingdom, which the eldest son handed to his eldest for many generations, as they had such an amount of wealth as was never possessed by kings and potentates, and is not likely to ever be again, as they were furnished with everything which they could have, both in city and country. These were the Edenic race. The eldest son was the Edenic race. They were without division of consciousness, right? They were born, and he's talking about these five races of humanity, right? These five races of humanity. The Edenic race were the richest of all. They were in the Garden of Eden with God, right? There was no fallen state. There was no descended nature, right? None of that. For because of the greatness of their empire, many things were brought to them from foreign countries, and the island itself provided much of what was required by them for the uses of life. In the first place, they dug out of the earth whatever was to be found there. Mineral as well as metal. Isn't that interesting? Mineral as well as metal, which represents all those colors of the rainbow. And that which is not only a name, and that which was then something more than a name. Orichalcum was dug out of the earth in many parts of the island, and with the exception of gold, was esteemed the most precious of metals among the men of those days. And I would love to see, let's check that up. Let's see what we get with that if we look that up real quick. Referred to exclusively a type of brass alloy used for minting Roman, Asterius, Dupondius, and semi-type of coins. For a Roman coin, a type of brass. So that would be like the hardest of the metals, right? Interesting that was the most precious among metal besides gold. Gold represents the heavens. In Hebrew, gold also represents spirit, right? That's why the Anunnaki came here to mine gold for their slave race, which was the dark-skinned people, or the shadow race, our lower carnal self, which mined for energy, right? For spirit, right? To be transmuted for spirit, transfigured into spirit like Christ, right? Okay? So the orichalcum was dug out of the earth in many parts, and the earth represents the land, which represents you. And with the exception of gold, so gold spirit was still the most precious, was esteemed the most precious of metals among the men of those days. There was an abundance of wood for carpenter's work. Wood, when it is solidified or petrified, it's plasma, right? Plasma. Wood derives from plasma for carpenter's work, energy. And sufficient maintenance for tame and wild animals. And we've talked about these tame and wild animals before. Remember, those wild animals, when the original species that came from the ethers descended down first, what did they commingle with? Animal spirits. That's why you see the Egyptian gods and shit like that with dog heads and bird heads and shit like that. Right? Because they took their favorite creations and commingled with them. And they have animalistic spirits which made them demons, right? Because their savagery of their animalistic side mixed with their human side and made them out of control. Okay? So think of what they're talking about. The maintenance for tame and wild animals. wild animals representing the demonic side. Moreover, there was a great number of elephants in the island. Elephants represents Taurian energy, or the age of Taurus. Elephants also have a very long memory, or a long lifespan. This is an age of people that they're talking about. And there was a provision for animals of every kind. Remember, when Adam was given the earth, he was given power to give names to all of the animals. Why so? Because this was part of his chemical makeup. If you look at the human genetics, or the human DNA, which is our genetic code, which is also our spiritual code. That's why our DNA is unique. Our fingerprint is unique to our aura, right? That's why my soul can't jump in your body, because mine is unique to my genetic code, to my magnetic code, which is my fingerprints, the spiral on top of my head, so on and so forth, right? But I have every plant, every animal, and every molecule within my DNA. Why is that? Why is that? Because they were all once a part of me, and they still are. Like they are you. Okay? Both for those which live in lakes and marshes and rivers, and also for those which live in mountains and on plains. And remember, the mountains, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Mountains represents the rock, the living rock, which is Christ, which we'll get into that a little bit later. And most voracious of them, also whatever fragrant things there were on the earth, whether roots or herbage or woods or distilling drops of flower or fruits, grew and thrived in that land. And again, the cultivated fruit of the earth, both the dry and edible fruit and other species of food, which we call by the general name of legumes, and the fruits having a hard rind, affording drinks and meats and ointments and good store of chestnuts and the like, which may be used to play with, and our fruits which spoil with keeping, and the pleasant kinds of dessert which console us after dinner, which we are full of and tired of eating. All these, the sacred iron lying beneath the sun, brought forth fair and wondrous and infinite abundance. All these things they received from the earth, and they employed themselves in constructing their temples and palaces and harbors and docks, and they arranged the whole country in the following manner. First of all, they bridged over the zones of sea which surrounded the ancient metropolis, and made a passage into and out of the royal palace. Isn't that interesting? I want you to kind of think about this. They're talking about the human body. Remember, let me show you this. Let me see if I can find this again. Let me just pop up here. Right here. Hopefully you guys can see this image over here. I'm going to have to make myself a little smaller. Right here. There we go. Interesting, right? The zones of which surrounded the ancient metropolis. Okay, and they made a passage into and out of the royal palace. The royal palace meaning heaven, right? The kingdom of heaven is within. That's your third eye. That's the connection to God, or the heavens, right? And then they began to build the palace in the habitation of the God and their ancestors. The ancestors, right, is everything that wraps around you. Your DNA, your skin, all of it. That is your ancestors. And they continued the ornament in successive generations. Every king surpassing the one who came before him to the utmost of his power, until they made the building a marvel to behold for size and beauty. Now I want you to think about what they're saying. Remember, there are certain beliefs, like ancient Chinese theories and all different types, that talk about we had different suns at different times, and that in the theory of catastrophism, that where there were ends of ages that ended in catastrophes with collisions with the earth, or Tiamat, which represents the divine feminine, right? The feminine serpent or the blue serpent, right? Nibiru representing the red serpent or the masculine serpent. The collision between these two creating new suns. The new suns becoming the planets that we see now, right? Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, so on and so forth, right? Now, then they made a building to behold and marvel for its size and beauty, and beginning from the sea of the heavens. Remember, the seas of the heavens are sea foam or seamen. They're the waters above the heavens, right? And they dug a canal 300 feet in width and 100 feet in depth and 50 stadia, there's that 50 again, which they carried through to the outermost zone, or the outer consciousness, outside of the collective consciousness, outer space, making a passage from the sea up to this, which became a harbor, and leaving an opening sufficient to enable the largest vessels to find ingress. These vessels are planets. These vessels are consciousness, right? They're talking about the solar system, or the soul system, which is also you. It's also you. The largest vessels to find ingress. Moreover, they divided the zones of land, which parted the zones of sea, constructing bridges of such a width as would leave a passage for a single trireme to pass out of one into another and root them over. One to another, reproduction, and root them over. And there was a way underneath for the ships, for the banks of the zones were raised considerably above the water. Right? The consciousness was above the water, right? Walking on water, Christ. Now the largest of the zones, which was the passage from the cut from the sea, was 3 stadia, 3 the triune in breadth, and the zone of the land, which came next of equal breadth, but the next 2, as well as the zone of water as of land, were 2 stadia. And the one which surrounded the central island was a stadium only in width. The island in which the palace was situated had a diameter of 5 stadia. The palace, which is your body, your temple, 5 stadia, 5 senses, right? The starfish body. This and the zones and the bridge, which was the 6th part of a stadium in width, they surrounded by a stone wall on either side, placing towers. Heliopolis, right? The twin pillars, and gates on the bridges where the sea passed in, right? The heavenly gates. The stone which was used in the work, or the cornerstone, right? The stone of Christ, right? Quarried from underneath the center island, from underneath the zones, and on the outer as well as the inner side. One kind of stone was white, another black, a third red, and they quarried, and they sat at the same time, hollowed out docks, double within, having roofs formed out of the native rock. Some of their buildings were simple, but in others they put together different stones, which they intermingled for the sake of ornament, to be a natural source of delight. The entire circuit of the wall, which went around the outermost one, they covered with a coating of brass. Remember that first one with brass? And the circuit of the next wall they coated with tin, right? And all these metals represent planets, by the way. Let's see if I can get this. I don't know if this is it. I think I gotta... See? Saturn, lead. Jupiter, tin. Mars, iron. Sun, gold. Venus, copper. Mercury, right? Moon, silver. Get me? These are the mysteries, by the way. And the circuit of the next wall they coated with tin, and the third, which encompassed the citadel, flashed with the red light of orichalcum. The places in the interior of the citadel were constructed in this wise. In the center was a holy temple dedicated to Cleto and Poseidon, which remained inaccessible and was surrounded by an enclosure of gold. This was the spot in which they originally begot the race of the 10 princes. And thither they annually brought the fruits of the earth in their season from all the 10 portions. These are the 10 levels. This is Jacob's ladder, right? And performed sacrifices to each of them. These are the harvest, or the end of the ages, the end of the cycles. Here too was Poseidon's own temple, of a stadium in length and half a stadium in width, and of a proportionate height, having a sort of barbaric splendor. All the outside of the temple, with the exception of the pinnacles, they covered with silver, and the pinnacles with gold. And the interior, and the pinnacles is you. That's a starfish body. It's the physical, right? They covered it with gold, meaning spirit or consciousness. And the interior of the temple, the roof was ivory, white, pure, adorned everywhere with gold and silver and orichalcum. And the other parts of the walls and pillars and the floors lewd with orichalcum. In the temple they placed statues of gold. There was the god himself standing in a chariot, the charioteer of 6 winged horses, which, remember the cherubim covered with eyes and all that in the Bible, in such of a size that he touched the roof of the building with his head. Around him there were 100 Nereids, riding on dolphins, for such that was thought to be the number of them in that day. There was also, in the interior of the temple, other images which had been dedicated by private individuals, and around the temple and the outside were placed statues of gold, and all the 10 kings and their wives. And there were many other great offerings, both of kings and private individuals, coming both from the city itself and the foreign cities which over they held sway. There was an altar too, which in size and workmanship corresponded to the rest of the work. And there were palaces in like manner, which answered the greatness of the kingdom and the glory of the temple. Now before we get into the next palace, we're going to jump to the creation of the first races. Now this comes out of the Secret Doctrine written by Helena Blavatsky, for any that is interested. And I do want to ask everybody that is watching to please make sure you hit that like, give us a thumbs up. This is the creation of the first races, and this is from Madame Blavatsky. Now we hear, these stories about Plato and how Plato's, Atlantis actually corresponds to the story of human consciousness and the construction of the ages and the ethers and the epochs and the aethers and how it all kind of come into existence. Now, let's see what this has for us. The creation of men, they are empty shadows. Remember, right? Born in the image, phantom, projection, illusion. The creators are perplexed how to create a thinking man, thought. What is needed for the formation of a perfect man, which is Metatron, 55 feet, the 5, right? The 7 hosts, the will or mind, born lords, propelled by the spirit of life-giving, or Fohat, separate men from themselves, each on his own zone. They threw off their shadows, or astral bodies, if such an ethereal being as a lunar spirit may be supposed to rejoice in an astral. Besides a hardly tangible body, in another commentary it is said that the ancestors breathed out the first man, as Brahma is explained to have breathed out the Suras, or the gods, when they became Asuras, from Asu, or breath. In a third, it is said that they, the newly created men, were the shadows of the shadows. They were the shadows of the shadows. With regard to this sentence, they were the shadows of the shadows. A few words may be said and a fuller explanation attempted. This first process of the evolution of mankind is far easier to accept than that one which follows it. Though one and all will be rejected and doubted even by some Kabbalists, especially the Western, who study the present effects, but have neglected to study their primary causes, nor does the writer feel competent to explain a mode of procreation so difficult of appreciation save for an Eastern occultist. Therefore, it is useless to enter here into details concerning the process, though it is minutely described in the secret books, as it would only lead to a speaking of facts that thereto unknown to the profane world, and hints to their being misunderstood. An atom made of the dust of the ground will always be found preferable by a certain class of students to one projected out of the ethereal body of his creator, though the former process has never been heard of, while the latter is familiar. As all know, to many spiritualists in Europe and America, who of all men ought to understand it, for who of those who have witnessed the phenomenon of materializing form oozing out of the pores of a medium, or at other times out of his left side, can fail to credit the possibility at least of such a birth If there are in the universe such beings as angels or spirits whose incorporeal essence may constitute an intelligent entity, notwithstanding the absence of any, to us, solid organism. And if there are those who believe that a God made the first man out of dust and breathed into him a living soul, and there are million upon millions who believe both, what does this doctrine of ours contain that is so impossible? Very soon the day will dawn when the world will have to choose whether it will accept the miraculous creation of man and cosmos too, out of nothing, according to the dead letter of Genesis, or a first man born from a fantastic link, absolutely missing so far. The common ancestor of man and of the true ape. Between these two fallacies, occult philosophy steps in. It teaches that the first human stock was projected by higher and semi-divine beings out of their own essences. If the latter process is to be considered as abnormal or even inconceivable because obsolete in nature at this point of evolution, it is yet proven possible on the authority of a certain spiritualistic facts, which then we ask of the three hypotheses or theories is the most reasonable and the least absurd. Certainly no one, provided he is not a soul-blind materialist, can ever object to the occult teaching. Now, as shown, we gather from the latter that man was not created the complete being he is now. However imperfect he still remains. There was a spiritual, a psychic, an intellectual, and an animal evolution from the highest to the lowest, as well as a physical development from the simple and homogeneous to the more complex and heterogeneous. Though not quite on the lines traced for us by the modern evolutionist, this double evolution in two contrary directions required various ages of diverse natures and degrees of spirituality and intellectuality to fabricate the being now known as man. Furthermore, the one absolute, ever-acting, and never-erring law, which proceeds on the Huxley, supported by the most evident discoveries in the comparative anatomy, could utter the momentous sentence that the anatomical differences between man and the highest apes are less than those between the latter and the lowest apes. In relation to our genealogical tree of man, the necessary conclusion follows that the human race has evolved gradually from the true apes. What may be the scientific and logical objections by the opposite conclusion, we would ask? The anatomical resemblances between man and the anthropoids, grossly exaggerated as they are by Darwinists, as quadrupeds shows, are simply enough accounted for when the origin of latter is taken into consideration. Nowhere in the older deposits is an ape to be found that approximates more closely to man, or a man that approximates more closely to an ape. The same gulf which is found today between man and ape goes back with undiminished breadth and depth to the tertiary period. The fact alone is enough to make it untenably clear. The same line from one eternity, or manfatara, to the other, ever furnishing an ascending scale for the manifestation of that which we call the great illusion, or Maya, but plunging spirit deeper and deeper into materiality on the one hand, and then redeeming it through the flesh and liberating it. This law, we say, uses for these purposes the beings from other and higher planes, men's or minds, manas, and according with their karmic exigencies. At this juncture, the reader is again asked to turn to the Indian philosophy and religion. The esotericism of both is at one with our secret doctrine, however much the form may differ and vary. On the identity and differences of the incarnating powers, the progenitors of man, called in India the fathers, Pitara or Pitras, are the creators of our bodies and lower principles, the male or masculine. They are ourselves as the first personalities. And where are they? Primeval man would be the bone of their bone and the flesh of their flesh, if they had body and flesh. As stated, they were lunar beings. Didn't somebody just show you the Sephiroth of the Kabbalah and say it all comes down to the lunar? The endowers of a man with his conscious immortal ego are the solar angels, whether so regarded metaphorically or literally. The mysteries of the conscious ego or human soul are great. The esoteric name of these solar angels is literally the Lords, or Nath, of persevering ceaseless devotion, or pranidhana. Therefore, they are of the fifth principle, or manas, to seem to be connected with, or to have originated the system of the yogis who make pranidhana their fifth observance. It has already been explained why the trans-Himalayan occultists regard them as evidently identical with those who in India are termed Kumaras, Agnishwatas, and the Barhishads. How precise and true is Plato's expression? Didn't we just read Plato? How profound and philosophical his remark on the human soul or ego when he has defined it as a compound of the same and the other. And yet how little this hint has been understood. Since the world took it to mean the soul was the breath of God, of Jehovah, and the same and the other, as a great initiate philosopher said, for the ego, or the higher self, when merged with and in the divine monad, is man, and yet the same as the other. The angel in him incarnated, as the same with the universal Ma'at. The great classics and philosophers felt this truth when saying that there must be something within us which produces our thoughts, something very subtle. It is a breath, it is a fire, it is ether. It is quintessence. It is a slender likeness. It is an intellection. It is a number. It is harmony. Voltaire. All these are the Manasam and Rahasas, the Kumaras and Asuras, and other rulers of Pitris, who incarnated in the third race, and in this and various other ways endowed mankind with mind, or thought, right? Thought. There are 7 classes of Pitris as shown below, 3 incorporeal, 4 corporeal, and 2 kinds, the Agnishwara and the Barhishad. And we may add that there are 2 kinds of Pitris. There is a double and a triple set of Barhishad and Agnishwara. Now, isn't this so crazy how it's exactly what we were just reading? Same numbers, same dimensions. The former, having given birth to their astral doubles, are reborn as the sons of a tree, and are the Pitris of the demons, or the fathers of demons, or corporeal beings, and the authority of Manu, while the Agnishwara are reborn as the sons of Marichi, or a son of Brahma, Brahma the bull, the Taurian age, right? And are the Pitris of the gods, Manu again, Matsya, Padma, Puranas, and Kaluka, and the laws of the Manavas. Moreover, the Vayu Purana declares all 7 orders to have originally been the first gods, the Varahas, who Brahma, the eye of the yoga, beheld in the eternal spheres, and who are the God of gods. And the Matsya adds that the gods worship them, while they corroborated in the secret teachings, which, however, identify the Virahas with the elder Agnishwaras and the Rahasas and the Abtu Rahasas, who are incorporeal without even an astral phantom. Vishnu is said, in most of the MMS or MSS, have to incarnated in through them. The Raveda Manivantara, again Hari, best of the gods, was born of Sambhuti and the divine Manassas, originating with the deities called Rahasas. Sambhuti was a daughter of Daksha and the wife of Marichi, the father of Agnishwara, who along with the Rahasas are even associated with Manassas, as remarked by a far more able Sanskrit than Wilson, Mr. Fitzgerald Hall. Manasseh is no appropriate name for a deity associated with the Rahasas. We appear to have it in Manasam. the same as manas, within the change of termination required to express male personification. And in the footnotes it says, we're quite aware that the Yayu and Matsya Puranas identify, agreeably to Western interpretation, with the seasons. And that the Barhishad Pitris identify with the months, adding a fourth class, or the Kaivas, or cyclic years, or the cycles, but do not Christian, Roman Catholics identify their angels with planets? And are not the seven rishis become the Saptarshi, a constellation? They are deities presiding all the cyclic divisions. So it's trying to show you something. You know, the months, the years, the days, all of it. We are identifying these things. It said we can multiply our proofs of an infinitum, but it's useless. The wise will understand our meaning. The unwise are not required to. There are 33 crores, or 330 millions, of gods in India. But as remarked by the learned lecturer on the Bhagavad Gita, they may be all devas, but are by no means all gods. In the high spiritual sense, one attributes to the term. This is an unfortunate blunder, he remarks, generally committed by Europeans. Deva is a kind of spiritual being, and because the same word is used in ordinary parlance to mean God, it by no means follows that we have to worship 33 crores of gods. And he adds suggestively, these beings, as may be naturally inferred, have a certain affinity with one of the three components, or basic principles, into which we have divided man. So these are 33 of the basic components or principles of man. And remember, Jesus was 33. You know. The names of the deities of certain mystic class change with every Manvantara. Thus, the 12 great gods, the Jayas, created by Brahma to assist him in the work of creation in the very beginning of the Kalpa, and who, lost in Samadhi, neglected to create. Whereupon they were cursed to be repeatedly born in each Manvantara till the seventh, and are respectively called Ajitas, Tushitas, Satyas, Haras, Vaikunthas, Sadyas, and Adyas. And they are Tushitas in the second Kalpa, and Aditas and Vaisivata period, or Vaya Purana. Besides other names for each age, they are identical with the Manasa and Rajasas. And they are incarnating with Daihan, Chohans, and they are all classes of the Ganavedas. Devas. The 7 times 7 shadows, or future men, were thus born, each of his own color, or complexion and kind, each also inferior to his father creator. The fathers, the boneless, could give no life to beings with bones. Therefore, their progeny were phantoms, or bhuta, with neither form nor mind. Therefore, they were called Chia, images, or shadow race. Interesting. The Pitris were divided into 7 classes, and we here have the mystic number of again. Puranas agree that 3 of these are arupa, formless, while 4 are corporeal, the former being intellectual and spiritual, the latter material and devoid of intellect. Esoterically, it is the Asuras who from the first 3 classes of Pitris born in the body of night. They were dark, right? They're born in the darkness. Whereas the other 4 were produced from the body of twilight. Their fathers, the gods, were doomed to be born fools on earth, according to Vayu Purana. The legends are purposely mixed up and made very hazy. The Pitris being in one of the sons of the gods, and in another those of Brahma, while a third makes them instructors of their own fathers. It is the host of the 4 material classes who create men simultaneously on the 7 zones. So these 7 classes of men are actually created simultaneously. Remember, there are 7, chakras. Now, with regard to the 7 class of Pitri, each of which, again, is divided into 7. And remember, Christ has asked, how he should forgive, people at 7 times 77. Right? A word to the students is a query to the profane. The class of the fire deities, which we identify on undeniable grounds with Agni Shwatas, is called in our school the heart of the Dhyan Kohanic body. And it is said to have incarnated in the third race of men and made them perfect. The esoteric mystagy speaks of the mysterious relation existing between the hebdomadic essence or substance of this angelic heart and that of man. Interesting. So if we look at the age of Aries or Marduk, that would be these fire, deities, right? Which were identifiable, and they were the heart of the Dhyan Kohanic body, and it's said to incarnate the third race of men. And remember, Marduk, right? He was the son of Enki. So you had Enlil, right? Which would he was like your bull god, right? But he came after his brother Enki. Enki was actually older, which would represent the divine feminine, right? And then you had Enlil, which was the masculine. Then Marduk representing like the sun, which would be the third race, which was fire, right? He was the ram or Aries, right? And that would represent, this perfect fire race of men. Then we went to Taurian and Piscean, right? From Earth to, or was it Taurian, then, you guys know what I'm saying. Then Piscean, right? The esoteric heart of the man who's, every physical organ and psychic and spiritual function is a reflection, so to say, a copy on the terrestrial plane of the model or prototype above, because we're a reflection, right? Now, why it is asked, should there be such a strange repetition of the number 7 in the anatomical structure of men? Why should the heart have 4 lower cavities and 3 higher divisions, answering so strangely to the septenary division of the human principles, separated into 2 groups, the higher and the lower? And think about it, higher being the Trinity, the triune, lower, like 4, the fortress, the base, the foundation, right? Making the 7, the number of God, okay? And why should the same division be found in the various classes of Petrus, which is fathers, especially of fire deities, or fire angels? For as already stated, the beings fall into 4 corporeal, or grosser, and 3 incorporeal, or subtler principles. And there, by any other names you please. Why do the 7 nervous plexuses of the body radiate 7 rays? Why are there 7 plexuses, and why 7 distinct layers in the human skin? Isn't that fucking weird? Right? The 7 just continues. It ain't just 7 days of the week and 7 chakras, dude. Right? We have 7 cavities of the heart, 3 upper, 4 lower. Right? 7 layers in the human skin. 7 plexuses that radiate the 7 rays in the nervous system. Interesting. Having projected their shadows and made men of one element, ether, the progenitors reascend to Mahaloka, whence they descend periodically when the world is renewed to give birth to new men. How about that? Coming from the ether, they descend to give birth to new men, right? So where it's just this constant fall, light bearer, Lucifer, fall and coming back up. The subtle bodies remain without understanding, manas, until the advent of the suras, or gods, now called asuras, or not gods. Not gods, for the Brahmins, perhaps the highest breaths for the occultists, since those progenitors, the formless and intellectual, refuse to build man, but endow him with mind, the 4 corporeal classes creating only his body. This is very plainly shown in the text of the Rig Veda, the highest authority for a Hindu of any sect whatever. Therein, asura means spiritual divine, and the word is used as a synonym for supreme spirit, while in the sense of a god, the term asura is applied to Varuna and Indra, and preeminently to Agni, the three having been in the days of old the three highest gods, before Brahmanical theo-mythology distorted the true meaning of almost everything in the archaic scriptures. But as the key is now lost, the Asuras are hardly mentioned. In the Zenda Vesta, the same is found. In the Mazdian or Magian religion, Asura is the Lord Asura, Asura Visavedas, the all-knowing or omniscient Lord. Asura Mazda, becoming the Ahura Mazda, is a Bimphishos, the Lord who bestows intelligence. Right? Lucifer, the light bearer. Asura Mita, or Ahura Mazda, elsewhere in this work it is shown on equally good authority that the Indo-Iranian Asura was always regarded as sevenfold. This fact combined with the name Mazda as above, which makes of the sevenfold Asura the Lord or Lords collectively who bestows intelligence, connects with the Amshapens or the Asuras with our incarnating Daihan Choans, as well as with the Elohim and the seven informing gods of Egypt, Chaldea, and every other country. Why these gods refuse to create men is not as stated in exoteric accounts, because their pride was too great to share the celestial power of their essence with the children of earth. But, for reasons already suggested, however, allegory has indulged in endless fancies and theology, taking advantage thereof in every country to make out its case against these firstborn, or these logoi, which is logos, and to impress it as truth on the minds of the ignorant and credulous. Compare also what is said about the Makara and the Kumaras in connection with the zodiac. The Christian system is not only the only one which has degraded them into demons. Zoroastrianism and even Brahmanism have profited thereby to obtain hold over the people's mind. Even in Chaldean exotericism, beings who refuse to create, i.e., who are said to oppose thereby the demiurge, or demiurgos, are also denounced as the spirits of darkness. The Suras, who win their intellectual independence, fight the Suras who are devoid thereof, who are shown as passing their lives in profitless ceremonial worship based on blind faith. A hint now ignored by Orthodox Brahmins, and forthwith the former become Asuras. The first and mind-born sons of the deity refuse to create progeny and are cursed by Brahma to be born as men. They are hurled down to the earth, which later on is transformed in theological dogma into the infernal religions. Ahriman destroys the bull created by Ormazd, which is the emblem of terrestrial elusive life, the germ of sorrow. And forgetting that the perishing finite seed must die in order that the plant of immortality, the plant of spiritual eternal life, should sprout and live, Ahriman is proclaimed the enemy, the opposing power, the devil. Typhon cuts Osiris into 14 pieces in order to prevent his peopling the world and thus creating misery. And Typhon becomes, in the exoteric theological teaching, the power of darkness. But all this in the exoteric shell. It is the worshippers of the latter who attribute the disobedience and rebellion, the effort and self-sacrifice of those who would help men to their original status of divinity through self-conscious efforts. And it is these worshippers of form who have made demons of the angels of light. Ooh, boy. Damn, that is interesting as fuck, is it not? The ones who kind of come up against these gods that didn't want us to come into creation at all have all been demonized like a motherfucker over time. And like, let's just think, Ahriman, Typhon, right? Who do we hear talked about in the Egyptian religions? We hear Osiris. We don't hear shit about Typhon, right? Ahriman is most definitely demonized big time, especially in theosophical circles. Esoteric philosophy, however, teaches that 1/3 of the Dionys, i.e., the three classes of the Araputa Petris endowed with intelligence, which is formless breath, composed of intellectual, not elementary substances or consciousness, was simply doomed by the law of karma and evolution to be reborn or incarnated on Earth. What? So they're saying basically we're cursed, according to these religions, by being born down here. Wow. We are the fallen, in essence. We're from the darkness, in essence. Whence the subsequent assertions of St. John's vision referred to in his Apocalypse about the great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon its heads, whose tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to the earth. The verse, did cast them to the earth, plainly shows its origin in the grandest and oldest allegory of the Aryan mystics, who, after the destruction of the Atlantean, where is this footnote? Sorry, guys. Of these were, oh man, here's the rest of the footnote. Footnote continued on the next page. The supposed rebels, they were simply those who, compelled by karmic law to drink the cup of gall to its last bitter drop, had to incarnate anew, and thus make responsible thinking entities of the astral statues projected by their inferior brothers, basically, brethren. Some are said to have refused because they had not in them the requisite materials, i.e., an astral body, since they were arupa. The refusal of others had reference to their having been adepts and yogis of long past preceding manvantaras, another mystery. But later on, as Nirmankayas, they sacrificed themselves for the good and salvation of the monads, which were waiting for their turn, and which otherwise would have to have lingered for countless ages in irresponsible, animal-like, though in appearance human forms. It may be a parable and an allegory within an allegory. Its solution is left to the intuition of the student if he only reads that which follows with his spiritual eye. As to their fashioners or ancestors, those angels who, in the exoteric legends, obeyed the law, they must be identical with the Barhishad Petris, or the Pitar Deveta, i.e., those possessed of the physical creative fire. They could only create, or rather clothe, the human monads with their own astral selves, but they could not make man in their image and likeness. Man must not be like one of us, says the creative gods, entrusted with the fabrication of the lower animal but higher. See Genesis and Plato's Timaeus. They're creating the semblance of men out of their own divine essence means, esoterically, and this is the footnote continued, so sorry, that's just the way it's written, guys, my bad. Footnote continued, the giants and sorcerers concealed the truth, astronomical, physical, and divine, as it is, a page out of pre-cosmic theogony, under various allegories. Its esoteric, true interpretation is a veritable theodice of the fallen angels, so-called the willing and the unwilling, the creators and those who refuse to create, being now mixed up most perplexingly by Christian Catholics who forget that their highest archangel, Saint Michael, who is shown to conquer, to master, and to assimilate the dragon of wisdom and of divine self-sacrifice, now miscalled and culminated as Satan, was the first to refuse to create. This led to endless confusion. So little does Christian theology understand the paradoxical language of the East and its symbolism that it even explains in its dead letter sense the Chinese Buddhist and Hindu exoteric rite of raising a noise during certain eclipses to scare away the great red dragon, which laid a plot to carry away the light. But here, light means esoteric wisdom. And we have sufficiently explained the secret meaning of the term dragon, serpent, etc., all of which refers to adepts and initiates. And if we think about this, that red dragon, right? Debiru, right? That masculine energy that refused to create, right? And then Tiamat, the one that got broken into pieces, the divine feminine dragon. Those two dragons, this is so fascinating. This is what Prometheus symbolized. That they who became the first race and thus shared its destiny and further evolution, they would not, simply because they could not, give to man the sacred spark which burns and expands into the flower of human reason and self-consciousness. For they had it not to give. Now this reminds me of like the Archons when they're trying to raise Adam, right? In reality of the rulers and the Nag Hammadi. Right? They're trying to raise him off the ground. They're blowing and blowing. And this motherfucker will not get up, right? It takes the ineffable, inexpressible creator to actually blow the divine breath into Adam. And then he rises up. And rises up in consciousness, right? Because he has true consciousness within him now. So the original people that made him, he was just a shadow of a shadow, like we've read here. This and that would probably be the Edenic Adam, before he knew the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So let's ask the question here, while we're at it. If we never knew evil, if we never ate the tree of knowledge of good and evil, if we never knew death, which remember Pluto, the lord of the underworld, Hades, he's the god of the occult, the hidden, the underworld, right? Thoth, right? Hermes, all of it, come on now. If we never knew death, if we never knew darkness, would we truly have consciousness or life? That's the question. This was left to the class of Devas, who became symbolized in Greece under the name of Prometheus. Prometheus, he was a light bearer too, right? To those who had naught to do with the physical body, yet everything with the purely spiritual man. See part 2 of the volume. The fallen angels and the gods of light proceeded from the gods of darkness. Each class of creators endows man with what it has to give. The one builds his external form. The other gives him its essence, which later on, becomes a human higher self, owing to the personal exertion of the individual. But they could not make men as they were themselves, perfect. Because sinless because having only the first pale shadowy outlines of attributes, and these all perfect from the human standpoint, white, pure, and cold as a virgin snow, where there is no struggle, there is no merit, humanity of the earthy, was not destined to be created by the angels of the first divine breath. Therefore they are said to have refused to do so. And man had to be formed by more material creators who, in their turn, could give only what they had in their own natures and no more. Think about that. This is why they say the angels were jealous of mankind. This is why they were jealous and they refused to do so. They couldn't fucking do it. They couldn't create us. They didn't have the pieces to make us. Wow. I mean, that is like a... They couldn't. We needed to take something from each age, a component from each age, an element from each age, to be able to make such a complex creature such as us. Subservient to eternal law, the pure gods could not only project out of themselves shadowy men, the shadow, the image, a little less ethereal and spiritual, because it's the demon, the daemon, the domain, right? The shadow, the lesser, the lower, the carnal. Therefore was a pale copy of its progenitors, too material even in its ethereality, to be a hierarchy of gods, too spiritual and pure to be men, endowed as it with every negative nirguna perfection, every negative perfection. These were dark beings. Perfection, to be fully such, must be born out of imperfection. The incorruptible must grow out of the corruptible, having the latter as its vehicle in basis and contrast. Absolute light is absolute darkness and vice versa. In fact, there is no light, neither light nor punishment following act, for which Adam and Eve might plead non-compos. Or not is no light nor darkness in the realms of truth. Good and evil are twins, the progeny of space and time, under the sway of Maya. Separate them by cutting off one from the other, and they will both die. Neither exists per se, since each has to be generated and created out of the other. In order to come into being, both must be known and appreciated before becoming objects of perception. Hence, in mortal mind, they must be divided. Now think about that. In the story of the Anunnaki, right, when Nibiru destroyed Tiamat, Marduk destroyed Tiamat, right, Kingu, which is representative of the moon, right, the physical, followed her the rest of her days, right? So the physical followed the spirit the rest of its days. It just gives you so much more of a depth and understanding of all of these other stories and all these other tales. I'm going to keep going if that's okay with you guys. We're going to go back to the footnotes here. In spite of all the efforts of the contrary, Christian theology, having burdened itself with the Hebrew esoteric accounts of creation of man, which is understood literally, cannot find any reasonable excuse for its God the Creator, who produces a man devoid of mind and sense, nor can it justify the punishment following an act for which Adam and Eve might plead non-compos. For if the couple is admitted to be ignorant of good and evil before the eating of the forbidden fruit, how could it be expected to know that disobedience was evil? If primeval man was meant to remain a half-witted, or rather witless being, then his creation was aimless and even cruel, if produced by an omnipotent and perfect God. But Adam and Eve are shown, even in Genesis, to be created by a class of lower divine beings, the Elohim, sons of God, who are so jealous of their personal prerogatives as reasonable and intelligent creatures that they will not allow man to become as one of us. This is plain, even from the dead letter meaning of the Bible. The Gnostics then were right in regarding the Jewish God as belonging to a class of lower material and not very holy denizens of the invisible world. Whew. What a kick in the nuts to the religious people right there. The Gnostics called your God the demiurge, right? The demiurge, meaning lower gods, right? Just saying, wow, what a kick in the dick. Nevertheless, as the illusionary distinction exists, it requires a lower order of creative angels to create inhabited globes, especially ours, or to deal with matters on this earthly plane. The philosophical Gnostics were the first to think so in the historical period and to invent various systems upon this theory. Therefore, in their schemes of creation, one always finds their creators occupying a place at the very foot of the ladder of spiritual being. With them, those who created our earth and its mortals were placed on the very limit of Mayavic matter, and their followers were taught to think, to great disgust of the church fathers, that for the creation of those wretched races in a spiritual and moral sense which grace our globe, no high divinity could be made responsible, but only angels of a low hierarchy, to which class they relegated the Jewish God, Jehovah. Mankind's different from the present are mentioned in all the ancient cosmogonies. Plato speaks in the Phaedrus of a winged race of men. Aristophanes, in Plato's Banquet, speaks of a race of androgynous and with round bodies, right? Celestial spheres. In Pymander, all the animal kingdom is even double-sexed, or hermaphroditical. Thus, in 18 it is said, the circuit having been accomplished, or orbit, or cycle, the knot was loosened. And all the animals which were equally androgynous were untied, separated, together with man. For the causes had to produce effects on earth. Again, the ancient Quiche manuscript, the Popol Vuh, published by the late Abbé Brasseur de Bourbourg, the first men are described as a race whose sight was unlimited and who knew all things at once, thus showing the divine knowledge of gods, not mortals. The secret doctrine, correcting the unavoidable exaggerations of popular fancy, gives the facts as they are recorded in the archaic symbols. Think about that, just for a fucking second. Now, why the fuck do we have, these places all across the earth and all these pyramids and shit that are on the ley lines, which, go according to geomancy, and the dimensions of these buildings and shit are according to sacred geometry and numerology, and they are, in accordance with the astrological and zodiacal symbols. Well, it's because they were the gods. The gods were us, like I said in the very fucking beginning of this video. I don't know if people, are coming to that conclusion with me. But that's what it is. In Isis Unveiled, several of these Gnostic systems are given. One is taken from the Codex Nazareus, or the Scriptures of the Nazarenes, who, although they existed long before the days of Christ and even before the law of Moses, were Gnostics, and many of them initiates. They held their mysteries of life in Nazara, ancient and modern Nazareth, and their doctrines are a faithful echo of the teachings of the secret doctrines, some of which we are now endeavoring to explain. Isn't that interesting? These Nazareth, from the Zara, right? And Jesus the Nazareth. And a lot of people describe him as like being an Essene, Nazarene. It's just interesting. The trees of life. These shadows were born, each of his own color and kind, each also inferior to his creator, because the latter was a complete being of his kind. The commentaries refer to the first sentence to the color or complexion of each human race thus evolved. In Pymander, the 7 primitive men created by nature from the heavenly man all partake of the qualities of the 7 governors or rulers who loved man, their own reflection and synthesis. And these 7 governors, right, we know these are the rulers of the reality of the 7 planets. 7 colors of the rainbow. In the Norse legends, one recognizes in Asgard the habitat of the gods, and also in the Ases themselves. The same mystical Loki and personifications woven into the popular myths, as in our secret doctrine, as we find them in the Vedas, the Puranas, the Mazdean scriptures, and the Kabbalah. And I wonder if it's Ashes. Ashes of the Scandinavia are the rulers of the world, which preceded ours, which names literally means the pillars of the world. Its supports are thus identical with the Greek cosmocrators, the 7 workmen or rectors of Pymander, the 7 rishis and pitris of India, the 7 Chaldean gods, and 7 evil spirits, the 7 Kabbalistic Sephiroth, synthesized by the upper triad, and even the 7 planetary spirits of the Christian mystics. The Ashes create the earth, the seas, the sky, and the clouds, the whole visible world, from the remains of the slain giant Ymir. But they do not create man, but only his form from the ask or ash tree. It is Odin who endows him with life and soul, after Lodor had given him blood and bones. And finally, it is Honir who furnishes him with his intellect, or manas. and with his conscious sense. Think about that. His manas, his intellect, and then Moses and God feeding them manna in the desert for 40 years. Is that 40 generations? You know, think about that. Or 40 cycles, you know. Very interesting. You know, Odin, the one-eyed god, too. The Norse asked the Hesiodic ash tree whence issued the men of the generation of bronze, the third root race, the Zeit tree of the Popol Vuh, out of which the Mexican third race of men was created, all one. This may be plainly seen by any reader, but the occult reason why the Norse Yggdrasil, the Hindu Aswathi, the Gogard, the Hellenic tree of life, and the Tibetan Zampun are one with the Kabbalistic Separathal tree, and even with the holy tree made by Ahura Mazda and the tree of Eden. Who among the Western scholars can tell? Nevertheless, the fruits of all those trees, whether Pipala or Heoma, or yet the more prosaic apple, are the plants of life. In fact and verity, the prototypes of our races were all enclosed in the microcosmic tree, which grew and developed within and under the great mundane macrocosmic tree. And the mystery is half revealed in the Dirgotamos, where it is said, Pipala, the sweet fruit of that tree, upon which come spirits, who everywhere it is the same, the creating powers produce man, but fail in their final object. All these logoi, or logos, strive to endow man with conscious immortal spirit, reflected in the mind alone. They fail, and they are all represented as being punished for the failure, if not for the attempt. What is the nature of the punishment? A sentence of imprisonment in the lower or nether region, which is our earth, the lowest in its chain in eternity, meaning the duration of the life cycle, and the darkness of matter within animal man? It has pleased the half-ignorant and half-designing church fathers to disfigure the graphic symbol. They took advantage of the metaphor and allegory found in every old religion to turn them to the benefit of the new one. Thus man was transformed into the darkness of a material hell. His divine consciousness, obtained from his indwelling principle, or the incarnated Deva, became the glaring flames of the infernal region. And our globe, that hell itself, the fruit of the tree of knowledge, were denounced as a forbidden fruit. And the serpent of wisdom, the voice of reason and consciousness, remained identified for ages with that fallen angel, which is that old dragon, the devil. The same for the other higher symbols. The swastika, the most sacred and mystic symbol in India, the Jaina cross, as it is now called by the Masons, notwithstanding its direct connection and even identity with the Christian cross, has become dishonored in the same manner. It is the devil's sign. We are told by Indian missionaries, does it not shine on the head of a great serpent of Vishnu, on the thousand-headed Sesha Ananta, in the depths of Patala, in the Hindu Naraka or hell? It does. But what is Ananta? As Sesha, it is the almost endless manvataric cycle of time, and it becomes infinite time itself. When called Ananta, the great seven-headed serpent on which rests Vishnu, the eternal deity, during pralaic inactivity, which has Satan to do with its highly metaphysical symbol. The swastika is the most philosophically scientific of all symbols and is the most comprehensible. It is a summary in a few lines of the whole work of creation or evolution, as one should rather say, from cosmotheogony down to anthropogeny, from the indivisible unknown parabrahm to the humble monorome of materialistic science, whose genesis is an unknown to that science as to that of the all-deity itself. The swastika is found heading the religious symbols of every old nation. It is the worker's hammer in the Chaldean book of Numbers, the hammer just referred to in the book of concealed mystery, which striketh sparks from the flint or space. Those sparks becoming worlds. It is Thor's hammer, the magic weapon forged by the dwarves against the giants or the pre-cosmic titanic forces of nature, which rebel, and which alive in the region of matter will not be subdued by the gods, the agents of universal harmony, but have first to be destroyed. This is why the world is formed out of the relics of the murdered Ymir. The swastika is the Mjolnir, or the storm hammer, and therefore it is said that when the Ases, the holy gods, after having been purified by the fire of passions and suffering in their life incarnations, become fit to dwell in Ida in eternal space, the Mjolnir will become useless. This will be when the bonds of Hel, the goddess queen of the region of the dead, will bind them no longer, for the kingdom of evil will have passed away. Satur's flames had not destroyed them, nor yet had the raging waters of the several deluges. Then came the sons of Thor. They brought Mjolnir with them, no longer as a weapon of war, but as a hammer in which to consecrate the new heaven and the new earth. Verily, many are its meanings in the macrocosmic work, the hammer of creation, with its forearms bent at right angles, refers to the continual motion and revolution of the invisible cosmos of forces, and that of the manifested cosmos and our earth. It points to the rotation and the cycles of time. It also points to the four cardinal directions, right? Or the four horsemen, the four winds, the four archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, of the world's axes and their equatorial belts, the two lines forming the swastika meaning spirit and matter, the four hooks suggesting the motion of the revolving cycles applied to the microcosm. Man, it shows him to be a link between heaven and earth, the right hand being raised at the end of a horizontal arm, the left pointing to the earth. And the Smaragdine tablet of Hermes, the uplifted right hand is inscribed with the word solve, the left with the word coagula. It is at one and the same time an alchemical, cosmogonical, and anthropological and magical sign, with 7 keys to its inner meaning. It is not too much to say that the compound symbolism of this universal and most suggestive of signs contains the keys to the 7 great mysteries of the cosmos, born in the mystical conception of the early Aryans, and by them placed at the very threshold of eternity on the head of the serpent, Ananta. It found its spiritual death in the scholastic interpretations of medieval anthropomorphists. It is the alpha and the omega of universal creative force, evolving from pure spirit and ending in gross matter. It is also the key to the cycle of science, divine and human. And he who comprehends its full meaning is forever liberated from the toils of Mahamaya, the great illusion and deceiver. The light that shines from under the divine hammer, now degraded into the mallet or gavel of the grand masters of Masonic lodges, is sufficient to dissipate the darkness of any human schemes or fictions. How prophetic are the songs of the 3 Norse goddesses, to whom the ravens of Odin whisper of the past and the future. As they flutter around in their abode of crystal beneath the flowing river, the songs are all written down in the scrolls of wisdom, which many are lost, but some still remain, and they repeat in poetical allegory the teachings of the archaic ages. To summarize from Dr. Wagner's Asgard and the Gods, the renewal of the world, which is a prophecy about the 7th race of our round told in the past tense. The Mjolnir had its duty in this round, and on the field of Ida, the field of resurrection for the 5th round, the sons of the highest gods assembled, and in them their fathers rose again, the egos of all their past incarnations. They talked of the past and the present, and remembered the wisdom and prophecies of their ancestor, which had all been fulfilled. Near them, but unseen of them, was the strong, the mighty one, who rules all things and ordains the eternal laws that govern the world. They all knew he was there. They felt his presence and his power, but were ignorant of his name. At his command, the new earth rose out of the waters of space. To the south, above the field of Ida, he made another heaven called Adlang, and further off a third, Widblane, over Gymel's cave. And a wondrous palace was erected, covered with gold and shining bright in the sun. These are the three gradually ascending planets of our chain. There the gods were enthroned as they used to be. From Gymel's heights, the seventh planet or globe, the highest and the purest, they looked down upon the happy descendants of Leaf and Leifdrasir, the coming Adam and Eve of purified humanity, and signed to them to climb up higher, to rise in knowledge and wisdom, step by step, from one heaven to another, until they were at last fit to be united to the gods in the house of the All-Father. How about that? And that's what I absolutely, I think that's a good place to stop right there. That is beautiful, actually. The coming Adam and Eve of purified humanity. And they signed to them to climb up higher, to rise in knowledge and wisdom, step by step from one heaven to another, until they were at last fit to be united to the gods in the house of the All-Father. Rise up in consciousness, through knowledge and wisdom, until we're back to source, back to God. That is pretty beautiful. It's pretty amazing. I want to thank everybody for joining me. I've been going for a while now, so I'm going to go ahead and, wrap this one up. I think I'll probably, continue this, probably do a part 2 or something. It's like every video I do, it's like I can never get it all in a couple of hours. I do want to ask everybody that's watching this, please, please, please like, share, comment, subscribe. That all helps me. And remember, I'm viewer powered, so please donate, support. It helps me a bunch. I'm about $100 away from the monthly goal, so help me get there. That'd be great. PayPal.me, the Best Damn Podcast. Cash App, Best Damn Podcast. Patreon, Best Damn Podcast Official. Or Facebook Messenger. It's Facebook, John Keane, Best Damn Podcast. Join us if you have donated in the month of February, or you joined us on Patreon, or you want to book a personal tarot reading. Text 513-393-2396 or email the Real Best Damn Podcast at gmail.com to get your private links or to book a personal tarot reading. Today and tomorrow only, Valentine's Day, $28 readings for those who want the discount. It stops after Valentine's Day. Make sure to, Instagram, Facebook, Best Damn Podcast, Twitter, The Real Best Damn. I am going to, put this out on all the platforms. So I just want to say thank you so much, everybody, for joining me, man. Thank you, Deborah Trudeau. Thank you, Marcus99, Graceful Heart, Kimberly F, Sean of Source. I appreciate all of you guys. Victoria, awesome. Melopedia Britannica, Lyra Belacqua. Okay, yeah, and I'm sorry it was late. So I did, I was on the phone, so that's why I was a little late. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. Like I said, donate, support, and like, share, comment, subscribe. All right, guys, I love you, and I'll see you next time. Peace.